Before we begin this video, I just want to make note that I do mention and use the words canonical, which I've expressed before. All P5 spin-offs are canonical. It's just that when I'm saying canonical in this context, it is in the sense that they actually matter to the canon, which is the wrong usage, but you get the point. I also want to make note that I'm not saying that I'm necessarily ungrateful for P5 spin-offs. I do actually like them. If you like them, that's fine. This is not a piece telling you you can't like them or that you have to like them. Thank you, and please enjoy the video. Persona 5 spin-offs. A seemingly never-ending train of content to keep the money rolling in at Atlas. A slow descent into madness as fans clamor for Persona 6, and Atlas just seems to not give it to them. And this sentiment is not new. This has been around for a very long time, but it's truly only gotten worse as time has gone on. And I think the problem stems from something a little bit deeper than I want Persona 6, yet that is what you hear. And generally that is the sentiment. A new P5 spin-off gets announced, a wave of people cry out, when's Persona 6? And you can't really blame them either. It's been almost 10 years since base Persona 5 launched, and 6 years since Royal. To a lot of people, it feels like Atlas is holding out on it, only to break the glass for Persona 6 when they really need it. So what is this growing dissatisfaction with Persona 5 spin-offs, and why has it gotten so bad?
We'll start off by scrubbing your mind.
This is probably going to be a relative retread if you are in the Persona community, or if you have watched some of my other videos about Persona 5 spin-offs, because I talk about this a lot. But let's take a look at the P5 spin-off catalog. You have Dancing, Q2, Strikers, Tactica, and Phantom X. It's not exactly a long list, but for one numbered game in a series of 5, it's kind of a lot. Obviously Atlas wants money, that's really no mystery, and investing in spin-offs of their most successful game in the last decade will make money. That is just a fact. But over the years, it has become obvious that these spin-offs are not exactly gearing themselves towards the Persona fans' interests. I'm gonna break down these spin-offs a little quickly. I've talked about it in the past, like I said before, so I don't want to spend too much time. First off is Dancing. Despite it being the funniest spin-off for Persona to get, there is an amazingly simple oversight from this game just popping up first. Taking a trip down memory lane, Persona 4 Dancing All Night worked because it was the final spin-off in the Persona 4 series of games. At least at the time. We don't know if there are going to be more down the line, especially with the remake coming. This means it encompasses songs from every single form of Persona 4 media. You had Maze of Life from Persona Q, you had Best Friend from Persona 4 Arena, and you had Break Out Of from Persona 4 Arena Ultimax. The only songs really not included were from the anime. But my point remains. Persona 5 Dancing releasing as the first spin-off in the series, whilst other spin-offs were being developed and actively planned, is kind of diabolical. And to add insult to injury, Persona 3 Dancing was in development at the same time. Instead of focusing resources into one game, they developed 2 games, so it feels like both of them are half products, instead of either one feeling like a full product. The other oversight is Dancing's story. And to be honest with you, I think the story is kind of what matters the most to Persona players. It really just boils down to character interactions, and I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. The problem is that the game takes place in a dream sequence. And for whatever reason, our cast has to forget this dream sequence at the very end. So these conversations have no effect on the overall existence of Persona 5. They don't affect the canon, they don't affect the characters. It is just pointless dribble. Now, let's compare this to Persona 4 Dancing story, which is not good, but it is still canonical. I want to tell you now that this is important. The influence these spin-offs have on the greater Persona 5 narrative is a part of that growing dissatisfaction. But to sum up Persona 5 Dancing, it is a game that was made way too early, with no real desire to fiddle with the canon, and plays it so safe that any characters related to Endgame are tossed into the DLC dungeon. You can also tell it was built alongside P3D because you can buy the DLC for that game, and it's the same as the ones available for this one. Like, you could get Lavenza's dance in Persona 3 Dancing, and you can also buy it in Persona 5 Dancing. despite the fact that Lavenza is not a character in Persona 3. Moving on to our next spin-off is Q2, which released about a year later. The game hams itself up as a crossover between Persona 3, 4, and 5, similar to Q1. Not much to say about this game, as something like this would obviously have to be non-canon. All three of these Persona games take place in different periods of time, and they're not aging up the cast, so something like this is just going to take place in a vacuum. But this is truly the only spin-off game I really expect not to be canonical, especially with how Persona 4's spin-offs are all canon. Q2's other issue is just how long it took to release. No English dub dealt a heavy blow to a lot of fans, and this most likely stemmed from the fact the game was being developed for the 3DS, which in 2018 to 2019 was a dying system. And it's not dead, but admittedly, most people have moved on to greener pastures. And then by a mile, the best-selling Persona 5 spin-off is Persona 5 Strikers. Wow, I wonder why. Anyways, this game is canon to the Persona 5 timeline, and it is developed as if it were another mainline Persona title, except with action combat. It doesn't do a perfect job at emulating the game visually. You can see some little, fuzz on the characters, on the outlines they're supposed to have, and some of the lighting's a little weird, but otherwise, it's almost indistinguishable. But the game essentially being a sequel to Persona 5 and actively being advertised as that is probably the primary reason this game was received so well. Even when you see people complete Persona 5, a lot of people say, you should also play Strikers. And that's pretty much the only spin-off that gets this kind of treatment. People buy Persona games not just for singular aspects, but for the whole package. And I think a big portion of that package is the narrative and characters. If the game does not expand on an existing universe in any meaningful way, then it feels like a why am I playing this kind of thing. Yes, there can be exceptions, but part of why the Persona community has had these expectations for spin-offs is, like I said before, Persona 4's 2 spin-offs are canonical. Arena giving us aged-up Persona 3 characters, and dancing taking place at the end of the main game, even past Arena. All of this somehow continues to be an issue when we move on to Tactica. This one has a number of issues stacked against it, but I think the major one is, once again, being within the Persona 5 timeline, which during the marketing cycle of the game made people skeptical, including me. They're not totally afraid of spoilers, as Lavenza does appear in the game, but they also are because this game does not feature Sumire, nor does it bring up characters like Maruki or Akechi. There was additional reason to care less with the Repaint Your Heart DLC, which 100% before the game even came out, I could tell you for sure that it would take place in a you will lose your memories scenario. Tactica's main story, thankfully, is not wiped from the cast's memories, but it still does not really expand on the universe in a true meaningful way. They can't really add development to the main cast when they have pre-existing arcs and events written out for them after the events of the game. Among other issues regarding Tactica is its art style, which, while some may view as charming, others may ask why didn't they just use Persona 5's art style? It's pretty unfortunate, but there are just too many small issues that have contributed to the overall growing distaste for Persona 5 spin-offs that Atlas could have avoided. And the last one, P5X, being a gacha, whilst also being the closest to a mainline Persona experience, is kind of two battles that it's fighting. I can at least respect the team for not making it the same cast as P5. Obviously, they want to do something else. But P5X is not really afraid to have its own story, as it is a divergence from the P5 timeline, according to the developers. However, regarding how the game is being handled by Sega, that has really only amplified dissent for this game, which is already bad because gachas are not looked upon very pleasantly on the Western side of things.
Just why did you need me for this?
And so, of course, the obvious reason is just that the spin-offs really don't mean anything for Persona 5. Persona 4 at least had canon to build upon, and you even got cameos and features from the P3 cast. These are all things that contribute to Persona fans' interest in these games. But why? Why are we getting so many P5 spin-offs? I mean, it's a JRPG, it's got an anime art style, it probably hasn't sold extremely well, right?
Right.
Wrong!
The Sega Sammy leak, where Sega forgot to redact sales data, makes the reasons for this kind of obvious. Sega has been struggling for a long time to find their footing, I would say. It's not that they don't have successful games, it's just that a lot of their games tend to be hit or miss. Sonic games really tend to fall into this category as far as I have seen. Yakuza, although pretty fun and cool, struggles to break free from its niche. Strategy games like Total War just aren't incredibly popular right now, and Shin Megami Tensei, while good, still cannot quite reach the numbers that would warrant an insane investment. In the Sega Sammy quarterly report for Q1 of 2025, we got sales data for several recent major titles. So let's talk about them by series. First up, Yakuza, or now known as Like a Dragon in the West, even though that's what it was known by in Japan, whatever. Since both The Man Who Erased His Name and Infinite Wealth released within the same-ish time frame, we see the sales data, and while they don't sell poorly, there is kind of a large drop-off after the launch window. Like a Dragon or Yakuza 7 actually does spike up around the release year of these two games, which makes sense, but again, big drop-off after, it's a bit rough. Next up is Sonic, which is like the titular Sega character. It's actually done fairly well. Superstars and Frontiers sold pretty well. There is, again, quite a large drop-off, but it seems to sell pretty steadily over the years. To be fair, at least on Frontiers' side. SMT5 is... it has its ups and downs. A huge chunk of sales are at release, and then the game kind of falls off pretty hard afterwards. 2 million combined for 5 and Vengeance is good, but you have to realize that the sales dropping that dramatically is probably not a great thing for the franchise. And of course, Persona. Both P5R and P3R are here, and you may note that Persona 5 Royal is the best-selling title on this list by a huge margin. Now, of course, Sonic stands at 4.5 million copies for Frontiers, and Persona 5 Royal hits over 7 million. Granted, Frontiers has only existed for a few years, comparatively to Royal and Persona 5, but if you look at Royal's sales over time, it's nothing to sneeze at.
Inspectors are not to be sneezed at. Okay, I've got it.
While it does fall off pretty hard after the initial release, once the remaster dropped for P5, the game has stayed at over 1 million copies yearly, which is insane for a anime JRPG. P3R also seems to be doing well, and I suspect will only grow with the coming Switch 2 version this year. But in short, there is an incredibly obvious reason that Sega, and therefore Atlus, is so invested in this game. Persona 5's success is unprecedented for this kind of game, this genre, and capitalizing on that is what they want to focus on right now. However, it is, in my opinion, a bit short-sighted because of how the spin-offs are designed.
You ready to call it quits?
In my eyes, these spin-offs should be supplements for the overarching Persona 5 story. They need to be meaningful, offering new stories and new insights to the Phantom Thieves. But no, Sega or Atlus, or maybe both, have come to the conclusion that these need to serve as both supplements and as entry points to the series. Everything is about getting new players in. When you already have players in, they're gonna buy these things anyways. A reasonable decision from a business standpoint, but a horrible oversight when it comes to interest in this game from the existing fan base, which is kind of what it feels like these should be made for. I'm sure there are people who found Persona via spin-off titles, and if you did, leave a comment. I actually kind of want to see what people have to say. I'll be honest that my first jump into the Persona franchise for games was actually Persona Q1, but I played it for about 40 minutes and then I gave it back. But I would not be mad if I got spoiled on a game's story because I chose to play the spin-off title before the actual main title. But they are so afraid to add spoilers into these games. I don't know if it has something to do with them internally, or if it has something to do with spoiler culture in general, but it's kind of insane. God forbid we get Akechi in his Black Mask form, or God forbid the characters actively mention events from the main game outside of unavoidable plot points. And God forbid Sumire is actually Sumire and not referred to as Kasumi. And it hurts even more with things like Persona 4 Arena existing, a game that expands on the existing universe and even gives us an update as to what the cast of the previous games are up to. I, for one, would love to revisit an aged-up Persona 4 cast with a canonical meeting between the casts of Persona 5 and Persona 3, or something like that. Hell, even Persona 1 and 2. I figured that they would use the spin-offs to try to drive a little bit of interest up for those two games, which are more forgotten, but still have demand for remakes or remasters. But it feels like we're stepping out of that zone. It doesn't feel like we're ever going to get that at this point. And I don't mean to be fully negative about it, but this is a growing pain of mine in terms of spin-offs and their canonical stories, as well as the fact that I was hoping at least one of these spin-offs would feature a few cast members from previous games. You know, that Strikers would have been a great time to do that. You're traveling around Japan, you know, that would be pretty cool. But either way, let's move on.
No.
And I don't know anything internally, but it feels like we might be out of the woods for Persona 5 spin-offs. This could either age really well or, like, milk. P5X obviously did launch this year in the West and in Japan, but technically it did launch officially last year because it launched in other parts of the world first. With everything kind of out and the only Persona title on the horizon being Persona 4 Reload, I want to say that I think we might be done with P5 spin-offs for now. That said, there was also a huge 3-year gap between Strikers and Tactica. I could be very wrong here. Either way, despite the fact that if there is another P5 spin-off, I will buy it, I think it is time for us to move forward. And by us, I mean us as a community, us as in Atlus as well, us as in Sega. You know, they won't listen to this, but I can dream. But this sales data is kind of telling. It feels like another P5 spin-off could spawn up out of nowhere, and we would all just be like, yeah, that makes sense. That's gonna happen. I just hope that if it does, it's canonical. I do not care if little Timmy goes to the store and picks up Persona 5, whatever, Arena, and gets spoiled on Persona 4 and Persona 3. I genuinely don't care. If you picked up the spin-off instead of buying the title beforehand, then, you know, whatever. And you can include in all the marketing, this title contains spoilers for Persona 5, 4, and 3. And that would just satisfy lots of people, because then it's their fault. I don't know, man. Whatever. Anyways, Atlus did do a new survey recently asking more questions about Persona-inspired spin-offs, but it's really nothing new, and they really didn't go into specifics. So, whatever. I still wait for a Persona 5 spin-off that actually does something with the cast beyond Strikers.
A masterpiece like her? Collecting dust in storage?
So in short, the reason why people are so fatigued from Persona 5 spin-offs is that it's been a long time since the last brand new mainline Persona game. Spin-offs worked to supplement Persona 4, but it also helped that Atlus wasn't so radio silent on Persona 5. The game actually did get announced in 2014, and while that is 6 years after Persona 4, it is only 2 years after Persona 4 Golden. And the game didn't launch in Japan until 2016, and during that time, only 2 Persona spin-offs, technically 3 if you count Ultimax, launched, versus what you have now, which is no official mention of Persona 6 explicitly, no teasers, no trailers, not even a peep, with 5 spin-offs launching in between and no clear end in sight. There is a firm belief by many people online that Atlus is in fact milking Persona 5, and sometimes I see this a little bit, but somehow that also Persona 6 is just being held until they cannot make any money off of P5. And while I understand that it does make sense to say that Atlus and Sega are technically milking Persona 5, as it is their most successful game in the past decade, I do not believe that they are sitting on a completed Persona 6. I think that is unfounded. Companies don't do that unless their name is Nintendo. And you cannot compare one of the most successful, if not the most successful, video game company of all time that houses multiple multi-million-dollar franchises and really can do what they want with their games, because if they put out Mario U Deluxe again, it somehow sells 10 to 20 million copies. What is going on there? The Mario Wonder exists, guys. Why are we still buying Mario Deluxe U? Why are we buying that instead of Wonder? Buy Wonder instead, it's a better game. But you just can't compare Nintendo to a smaller and less successful company. They have a lot of successful IPs, but they are a much smaller company and they don't have those kinds of IPs like Super fucking Mario, 20 million copies sold without even thinking. And yes, while I am someone who will continue to purchase Persona 5 spin-offs because I have no shame and I love this game, I think it's obvious that people just want Persona 6. And I don't blame Atlus or Sega for not announcing it when it's not ready. If we take a trip back to about 2 months ago with the announcement of Persona 4 Revival, it is evident to me that that game is nowhere close to being done, and they make it very clear in the trailer. And if they announce Persona 6 before they believe it is ready, then it might get ridiculed the same way that Persona 4 Revival was. And that's with the assumption that Revival is nowhere near completion. From most people's perspectives, Persona 6 should nearly be ready. To them, they've been waiting those 9 years, even if the game hasn't been in development for all 9 of those years. As some rumors do say that it's only been in development since 2019. But to fans, those 9 years will always be those 9 years. It doesn't change anything. People will believe what they want to believe. Let's just put it that way. But that lack of information has led to all sorts of crazy things, like the fact that ex-leaker Midori had so much attention on him and would still have that attention if not for being outed as posing as a Japanese woman. There's actually a white guy, I think. I don't remember. He was a very prominent figure in the community for a while because of the heavy lack of information coming from Atlus regarding things like Persona 6. People want to hear information, people want to know what is going on, and Atlus and Sega aren't really communicating that much either. It's also evident that Atlus is trying to avoid a vanilla Persona 5 situation, where the game runs into developmental issues and has to be delayed several times after official announcement. You can make the argument that Persona 4 Revival getting announced in the state that it was in is evidence that they still don't get it, but I think that game is kind of a special case, and if it is Microsoft reaching out to Atlus, asking if they have anything to show, they felt like they'd rather show that, yeah, we're remaking Persona 4, rather than a premature showcase of Persona 6. And obviously, the answer to this is, I don't know. I was pretty confident that the game would be announced at the Game Awards last year, and that did not come to pass. And this year, I do think it's a bit hasty to make assumptions like that. Persona 4 Revival's announcement definitely throws a wrench in my speculation, as I was fairly firm on believing that Persona 6 would be the next Persona title to launch, and that's not completely impossible either. But it could be less likely with them announcing P4 Revival instead of Persona 6. All we have to go on is rumors, like the one saying that Reload took about 3 years to develop, and over 1.5 years to localize. And then also that Persona 6 is rumored to have been in development since 2019. I don't believe that Revival will launch soon, only if we get an updated trailer by the end of this year, really showcasing everything that was missing from this trailer. But if we don't get that updated trailer by the end of this year, I don't think it's even launching next year. I know everyone is holding on to this part of the Sega Sammy that says the game will launch in or after fiscal year 2027 or whatever. But I want to point out that if they were remotely confident in a release date for next year, that would have been in the trailer. I want to note the absence of voices, rearranged music, NPCs, and the lack of gameplay footage. This game is nowhere near done. The problem is that all of this just leads back to where's Persona 6, the main thing that we've been talking about. And at this point, we are just in an infinite loop of thinking Persona 6 is on the horizon, and then it turning out to be something else, and the game being even further away than we thought. And despite all that, despite my hopes that Persona 6 will launch soon, I'm not going to wait around for Atlus to drop the game. If Atlus isn't going to talk about it, even in name, then I'll be playing other games worth playing in the meantime. I will come back for Persona 6, obviously, but there are other games out there, and it's time to experience other things. Because constantly asking, when's Persona 6, and when a Persona 5 spinoff gets announced, complaining about it, it's becoming a loop. It is, we are locked in an infinite loop. Just never ending. Just always same thing. New spin-off, new Atlus game. Where's Persona 6? Every single time, and it just loops over and over and over again. And you know what? This will be a poorly aged video if the game gets announced at Gamescom. But like that's gonna happen. Let's be realistic. So you guys can let me know what you think of the growing dissent for Persona 5 spin-offs and your desires for Persona 6 in the comments down below. As always, you can leave a like if you enjoyed the video, and subscribe to the channel for more things Persona, Atlus, and JRPG related. I do want to step away from this like crazy wave of negative content I've been making. I feel like it's good for metrics, but it's kind of like, I like these games. I really do like these games. It is just kind of hard to be positive about them right now when everything is kind of working against them. So, it is what it is. But, thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.
Oh, fuck yeah. Wait, I was putting